Remigration is the only way. With one post on X, Elon Musk put a brick through Britain's Overton window. Now, he was responding to Steve Laws, who doesn't like me very much. He thinks I'm too soft. I disagree with Steve's policy of deporting people with one English parent and one foreign parent to whichever country the foreign parent comes from, considering that they are half English and have grown up here all their lives. But that is immaterial, because now the conversation about returning hostile, unassimilable foreign nationals, total strangers who have made no effort to integrate and ingratiate themselves with the native host population of Britain, people who have not joined our family, joined our national tribe, people who we never wanted to be here in the first place, that conversation about returning them to their home has opened up. And this is the value, no matter my disagreements with Elon Musk on things like reproductive technology or H-1B visas in America, this is the value of Elon Musk buying X. He has swept the minds for the rest of us with more to lose than being the richest man in the world, to talk about taboo issues, but policies which are absolutely necessary for salvaging our countries from the demographic, cultural, and economic disfigurement that they've undergone thanks to mass migration and multiculturalism over the last few decades. And this has Guardian columnists running scared. So this is Jonathan Liew, who usually only writes about sports for The Guardian, but when his identity as a collective immigrant appears to come under threat, he dives in front of these necessary policies and decides to identify with people that we don't want to be here, that we don't like very much, like he's a poo in front of Homer Simpson blocking the bullet. And Jonathan Liew says, what is the endgame in this toxic immigration debate? Is it friends and neighbours thrown out of the country? No, not necessarily. I disagree with Steve Laws' prescription that, quote, they all have to go back, everyone since 1945. I think we just remove the citizenship of people who fit the description of not being conducive to the public good per the Shamima Begum ruling. I think we remove indefinite leave to remain. I think we revoke all benefits, social housing, and healthcare access to people who have come to this country. If you can't support yourself, why should I support you being here? I didn't want you here in the first place. Neither did most of the public. I think we forcibly deport every single illegal immigrant and foreign criminal in our prisons, and then we proscribe certain cultural behaviours that we do not like. For example, halal slaughter, wearing the burqa. I don't think we should tolerate Islam at all in our country, thank you very much. And so if you seek to break these new laws, you will be deported like every other criminal. Or, if you want to practice those foreign cultures, customs, and faiths, you can go elsewhere. There are plenty of countries in which you can do that. You have a home to go to. This is my home. I don't want it ruined because I have nowhere else to go when you ruin it. So Jonathan Liew, though, is making, ironically, the blanket remigration policies, which I do not support, all the more likely, because he is the one who's refusing to distinguish between friends and neighbours and the class category of immigrant. For example, I would not put a friend of mine's American wife, a Hong Kong refugee fleeing communist Chinese persecution who wants to return to their home one day when the yoke of CCP rule is lifted, and a Moroccan illegal migrant who's broken into the country on the promise of sexually assaulting a British woman, as played to him in a TikTok by a people smuggling gang. I would not put all those people in the same category, because they're from different places, with different beliefs, different cultures, and they have different behaviours. But for some reason, Jonathan Liew's like, no, they're all immigrants. They all have to be welcome. They all have to be accepted, which puts you in the binary of either you tolerate thousands of foreign sex offenders being placed in hotels at your expense, or you support the policy that says literally all of them have to go. I'm not in favour of breaking out the colour swatches, but Jonathan Liew's Guardian article, and those like him who are trying to prevent any deportations, any form of remigration that they might conceive of, the people that are trying to prevent all that are making the blanket deportation of everyone who isn't ethnically British possible. And again, I'm a sensible, squishy moderate who doesn't think that's necessary nor desirable. I don't think it would be justified to treat Raja Mia like he's a grooming gang perpetrator, for example. That would be unjust. It would fail to discriminate on the morality of their behaviours. But Jonathan Liew and the rest of The Guardian, if you want that to be the case, if you want every single non-ethnically British person to be deported, keep writing this. Because you're just going to bring civilization to the brink where that conversation is had. And He writes, this is a subtitle, "The notion of remigration was abstract, but the right is dragging it towards respectability. If the goal is homogenous whiteness, then they should say it." This is the irony. It actually isn't. But he knows this as well. He knows it's not homogenous whiteness, because the Albanians are pretty pasty, and I don't want to be ruled by them either. But he knows this is the case, and so he is trying to, like in another article that we read about calling your opponents Nazis and fascists, and how they know that this isn't the case for most of them, but it's just a rhetorical smear tactic. He knows that this triggers a tripwire in the liberal sensibilities of the majority of the British public, including the people who are pro-mass deportations, pro-removing people that don't like them and they don't like from their country who don't need to be here. He knows that they recoil at the accusation of arbitrary ethnic bigotry, and so he's hoping to force them to abandon this policy. But the truth is, most people prioritize removing foreign sex offenders who are a threat to their daughters from the country over being called racist by Guardian columnists. So, if you make this a binary, they will just go, let's remove all the people who are foreign so that there are no more rapists in the country, to let's keep the foreigners here who will call me racist if I don't want foreign rapists in my country. Do you understand how this works? You're making a dialectic, and you're on the losing end of it. He writes, "Do they come for you at dawn or dusk, in the dead of night, or at family dinner time? Will they come with masks and shields, or will they be kindly and sheepishly apologetic? Will they accept a cup of tea and a biscuit if offered? Will there be bags already packed by the door, protocols prepped and drilled, a list of numbers to call? Will you go quietly with dignity, or in a mess of curse words and screaming limbs?" He could be describing, frankly, any of the recent arrests that the police have made, 30 a day now, 12,000 a year, of people complaining about the crimes of migration online and have been arrested for public order offences or offensive speech on the internet. He could be describing any of this because it basically fits the description of the first chapter of Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, where people were arrested in the dead of night in fits of panic to force them to sign false confessions and be sent off to gulags for speaking out against the Stalinist government. And the same thing has happened in Britain. But instead, this is some sort of fevered dream about deporting people on the basis of their ethnicity, which, I might remind you, is undesirable and is entirely avoidable, but, again, articles like this make it more likely. Perhaps right now this feels all a little fantastical and far-fetched. Perhaps it feels hard to imagine the great wave of remigration lapping up on the pristine middle-class doorsteps of Stroud or Stoke Newington. We can still have a chuckle about it. Maybe there'll be a nice fat relocation check, a free one-way holiday on the British government, always wanted to visit China at this time of year, and so on. But of course, if the recent history of British politics has taught us anything, it is that nightmarish visions do not stay nightmarish for long. There is a heft and a momentum behind them, a spirited and concerted effort to make the nightmare flesh. And so in our darkest daydreams, many of the non-white citizens of this country occasionally entertain an idle thought exercise. Who wants to get rid of us? Is it you, grumbling old lady on the bus? Is it you, the smartly dressed businessman, tutting quietly as two beaming mixed-race children whiz by on mini-scooters? Was that an innocent jostle in the pub queue, or the unmistakable microaggression of a seething racist who wants me gone for good? If you don't like living around these people so much, why are you here? Seriously. If you have this persistent paranoia that literally everyone means you ill, when the vast majority of people don't, you can see this with polling, you can see this with most of your daily interactions. If you think that people harbour some hidden ethnic resentment against you when you've done them nothing wrong, why are you there? Like, if I was in Japan, and I love Japan, right? Going back there for my honeymoon in a couple of weeks. If I was in Japan and I felt a sense that I wasn't wanted there by the Japanese, I would leave. Because why would I want to be in a civilization that's so low trust that I can't rely on my neighbours, where if I am in a crisis, they will not help me out? And the only reason why they wouldn't help you out is if you have not built up sufficient relationships with the people around you. Like, I don't know where Jonathan lives, right? But if he's a Guardian writer, he might well live in London, for example. He probably lives in one of the cosmopolitan metropoles that have sprung up as bastions of diversity, a bit like a Tower of Babel in the middle of our city. I would wager that because of the living circumstances and social decay in our country, he probably doesn't know his neighbours all that well, right? So if you haven't ingratiated yourself with a local community, if you aren't going to a parish church, if you aren't married to an English man or woman, if you haven't made yourself a part of our tribe, our congregation, our national family, this explains why you regard everyone around you with hostility and suspicion and contempt. And so either ingratiate yourself with these communities to the extent where, when we are deciding who our political friends and who our enemies are, and who we would like to leave and who we would like to stay, you fall on the staying side, Or you can keep calling everyone racist, you can keep regarding everyone with suspicion, you can keep using slurs like microaggressions against us, and in the dark future that your article is making inevitable, you will fall on the wrong side of it. And you know what? If offering safe passage and economic opportunities to foreign nationals comes with the price of being called racist by those foreign nationals and their children, no matter how generous and polite we are, then the price isn't worth it. Again, I'm not actually as hardline as someone like Steve Laws is on this stuff, but you're going to get more Steve Lawses than you are me's if you keep pushing this, mate. Just going to let you know. He writes, through the long years of Windrush scandals and asylum panic, entirely legitimate, Brexit and beyond, from the British National Party and local government to white nationalists proudly parading through our streets, from the Rwanda scheme to the large swap theory, have to euphemize it for YouTube, a menacing anti-migrant movement has been growling into gear, and we should probably be clear at this point that hotels and small boats were never the end game. This is absolutely true. Mass demographic displacement is not any better if the change agents have the appropriate documents. The result is still the same. If you input en masse foreign peoples, cultures, and faiths into another civilization, you won't get the same civilization at the end of it. And we had a very high trust, low enforcement, peaceful and prosperous civilization before other dysfunctional peoples brought their cultures over, especially because they were not asked to bring said cultures, and they were inflicted upon the population by our liberal governments in the first place. Of course, we knew right from the start that legitimate concerns over immigration always had a kernel of racial purification at their core. Not the case. Nope. As Eric Kaufman points out in White Shift, himself mixed from many races, he says that concerns about immigration that are couched in logistical and economic terms are usually proxies for cultural and demographic concerns. This does not mean racial purification. Yet again, I wouldn't want to be colonized by the French, or the Germans, or the Albanians, and they're all pretty pasty to me. It's about preserving the network of families that founded the state, that act as the custodians of its culture, as being the unquestionable host demographic majority. If a people ceases to be a majority in their own country, the country ceases to be. So, it's not about racial purification, it's about who owns our country. Is it the people it is named after, or is it the entire world in waiting to come to this country and reap its rewards without recreating the country in the first place? Is it the preservers, or is it the plunderers? I'm on the side of the preservers. The tropes and elisions of right-wing discourse, traditional British values, Londonistan, multiculturalism, were always mere euphemisms for simpler and more sinister desires. Again, if you're going to lump everyone into the same box, you're going to get the furthest possible fringe of that box. And perhaps you think that by doing that, you'll discredit the movement, but instead what you'll get, as the undeniable atrocities that result from mass immigration and multiculturalism continue to accrue, instead you're going to normalize the most violent and punitive and unjust policies associated with reversing mass immigration, rather than the sensible, reasonable, and moral policies that lots of people like Melanie Phillips or myself have been advancing. And I say Melanie Phillips because he's obviously referencing her Londonistan book there. He says, what has been left unsaid until relatively recently has been the other half of the equation, how these desires are going to be sated, the roundups and deportations, families being handcuffed and strapped into planes, the wartime-style powers that would create a permanently hostile environment for anyone deemed insufficiently native. This is the omerta that is gradually dissolving. Naturally, Nigel Farage knew what he was doing when he appeared to exclude women and children from his plan to deport 600,000 people in the first term of a reform government. Yeah, that's an error, because, especially from the Islamic world, if you deport their fathers, then the children are going to grow up as resentful jihadist radicals who wreak their revenge on their host civilization when they get to the appropriate age. So, the families have to go together. As Tom Homan once said, he is a savvy enough operator to know that there is not yet a political consensus around the mass deportation of families, much less established citizens. Just wait for the further revelations for the grooming gangs to come out and for more immigrants to commit sex offences. Because there will be a realization that a collective crime has been committed by the Pakistani community in Britain, who live in their enclaves but know that their husbands, brothers, sons, cousins, often the same thing, have been committing unspeakable atrocities against white English girls on the basis of their religion and race, and have, in the words of the head of the Ramadan Foundation in 2016, been burying their heads in the sand because they don't want to be seen as siding with the white enemy. Yasmin Ali Harbi Brown wrote for the Daily Mail, and she described conversations with Muslim women who justified the abuse of these girls because they said, by Allah, have you seen the way they dress? Basically, they dress so immodestly that they were asking for it. Again, Ed Hussein talking to moderate imams in Bradford, blamed the British Empire and the girls themselves for getting drunk and on drugs supplied to them by Pakistanis, and said it's nothing to do with Islam, mate. Like, there are repeated justifications here that members of these Muslim enclaves have themselves blown the whistle on, and should be commended for that, that point to liberal individualistic Brits not having the moral language to understand how a parallel civilization harbours an ethnic and religious hatred towards them and is inflicting that violently on their children. And so the only appropriate response, if it isn't solved now, will be collective punishment, will be banishment. If you don't want that to happen, maybe address the problem. He says, recall that as recently as last September, Farage was rejecting mass deportations as a political impossibility, and it becomes clear that his intention is to shift the window of the acceptable, firmly but by small degrees. I think it's actually more clear that, as Gawain Towler said, Farage is waiting for the wave to be built for him so that he can ride its crest. So I don't think Farage is himself nudging the Overton window. I think he's allowing other people to sweep the mines on his behalf and then ride on the coattails of the growing political support for that given position, because Reform already codes as the mass deportations party, even though they didn't support it until recently. And hey, I'm always thankful that they catch up in the end. I just hope that they have a competent plan to carry it out. He says, in the meantime, there are plenty of loud voices happy to make the case in his absence. You do not even need to wade into the swamp waters of X and Facebook, where remigration discourse has spiraled into a kind of mass frenzy, where non-white Britons are routinely hounded with cries of deport. The MP Rupert Lowe has published his blueprint for the mass deportation of illegal migrants, and of course, once you have the levers of power, the words illegal and migrant can mean whatever you want them to mean. No, they're pretty defined. I mean, if you weren't wanted here, if you break over our border in a boat from Calais, or you overstay your visa, or you smuggle yourself aboard a lorry from the Channel Tunnel, then or aboard a ferry, then yeah, you're an illegal migrant that shouldn't be here. And all of the laws that frustrate the carrying out of deportations, according to immigration law, all of those conflicting laws should be removed and repealed. So we actually have a very clearly defined mandate for what we want to do. And it's only you that's trying to poison the well and prevent any illegal migrant and any foreign criminal from being deported. And that's such an absurd position that you're then going to cause people to leap to the position to the right of that. Good luck if you want to prevent it, not going to work. From Epping to the sea, let's make England Abdul-free, proclaimed the former Conservative and UKIP MP Douglas Carswell last week, and Douglas explained that his squishiness on migration before has now been solidified by the repeated terror attacks committed by Muslims in Britain. And I agree with him. Islam does not belong in Britain. The paradox here is that there are extreme fringe viewpoints advocated by a tiny sliver of the British population, and yet with the potential to exert a frighteningly disproportionate influence on a future political class. That's because 53% of the British public, when polled by YouGov recently, said Islam is incompatible with British traditions, and the majority of the public, 9 in 10 constituencies, want mass migration stopped. Many of them want it reversed. They want all illegal immigrants deported, and they want many millions of people to go back home. They do not belong here, they are expensive, they are strangers, they don't like us very much, and they should leave. And it's not just fringe people. Actually, the way that this works is they are opening up fissures of latent public sentiment that until now has not been given permission to be expressed, but it's bubbling along in an undercurrent in places where, presumably, Jonathan does not mingle. He probably doesn't pierce his bubble of Guardian columnist social circles very much. And he goes, where does it go next? Perhaps recent legal migrants, as advocated by a Times columnist on Monday, and he's referring to this piece by Jenny Russell, which says, Shabana Mahmood's first job is to block the Boris wave. Now, I won't hold my breath if dedicated Pakistani Muslim Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, presiding over the 700-strong Islamic network in the Home Office, would decide to send loads of Muslim migrants home, brought here by Boris Johnson. However, the fact that the word Boris wave is used in the title of a Times article, total Max Tempers victory, right? The idea that Sam Bidwell has put forward that indefinite leave to remain can just be cancelled by the Home Secretary, that all of these people can have their ILR expire and can just have to go home is now mainstream discourse. It's obviously sensible. It avoids the hundreds of billions pounds bill that is coming at us fast down the track as calculated by Carl Williams at the Centre for Policy Studies. And she has just said, here, Jenny, in the pages of the Times, the British public has long been assured that immigration is vital both to public services and economic growth, yet the majority of those arriving under the reckless Boris wave did not fulfil either function. Fewer than a fifth came in as workers, 5.4% were skilled and highly paid, 7% were on health and care visas. The vast majority of those low paid allowed officially to work at less than the going rate for their jobs. 4.6% were on other work visas, the remaining 83% came in as dependents, family, students, or on humanitarian routes. And 95% are never going to be net tax contributors across their lifetime. Why are we battery farming tax dependents? Even students are not always the intellectual and economic assets they once were. The white paper reported that some low-ranking colleagues were used as entry points by people who had no intention of completing the course, the route categorised by the MP Neil O'Brien as the Deliveroo visa. Graduate visas expected to bring in the brightest and allow them to work for 2 years afterwards have proved no more reliable. Fewer than a third go into graduate jobs, and student claims for asylum have tripled in 3 years to 16,500 in 2024, with most applications made just as a course ends, even though little or nothing has changed in their home countries, and many of these are from India and Bangladesh, where there is no war and which are culturally very distant from us. Says the looming issue with the Boris wave arrivals is, as the government knows, but few voters realise, that the first cohort are about to qualify for permission to live in Britain indefinitely. From January 2026 onwards, most who have been here for 5 years can apply for indefinite leave to remain. 400,000 could do so in the next year alone. ILR is usually granted automatically, unless applicants have a serious criminal record. It means that without a change of policy, there is about to be a huge surge in the numbers settling permanently, the majority not net contributors to the economy, and that doesn't even address the cultural concerns. The likely cost to the public purse will be in the billions, and even if they paid vast amounts of taxes, they would still be strangers, and their culture would not recreate Britain at the end of this demographic revolution. So she says, this spring the government appeared to agree. The white paper promised that the standard time before ILR was granted would double from 5 years to 10, with exceptions to the families of British citizens and those who contributed the most. A point system would be used to decide merit. Settlement would be earned, not given as a right. The paper implied the new rules would apply retrospectively to those already here. There would be a public consultation on the details, but Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary at the time, wanted change as swiftly as possible. Mahmoud must spur them into action in terms of the civil service. Because it says, whatever the reason, the Home Office certainly isn't moving quickly. I asked when the consultation would begin, and a day and a half later was told before the end of the year. Unless Mahmoud does, the damage the Boris wave caused is about to be entrenched. Her party may hesitate, but voters want fairness and control. They will not forgive Labour for failing to do so. This is absolutely the case. This is a sensible policy. It can be done with a stroke of a Whitehall pen with sufficient political will. And the only alternative to this is all these people remaining here for no reason other than Jonathan sees them as co-ethnics, members of the category immigrant, and so thinks we should pay indefinitely for people from the third world to live in the lap of luxury at our expense just because he is afraid of being sent home as well. Well, what he doesn't realise is sensible immigration policies, listening to the concerns of British voters, returning hostile foreign nationals, foreign criminals, illegal migrants, and expensive strangers to their homelands is the way that we actually separate out our political friends and our political enemies. Now, Jonathan has marked himself out as my political enemy here, and he also doesn't seem to like the British host majority population very much if he thinks they're harbouring secret racist views against him all the time, so perhaps he should move and live elsewhere. But if he'd like the opportunity to move, rather than being forced out by someone as militant as Steve Laws, well, I recommend he takes the political off-ramp and sends the Boris wave home. I'll just end by reading his conclusion, because you can sense the palpable fear in the Guardian columnists that know they're losing the argument on this. Politics at the voter level is so often a direction rather than a destination. Most of us have no coherent overarching vision for how the world should work, much less how we should get there. What we so often describe as politics is in fact a series of shoves, splenetic, emotional, and with a willful blindness to consequence that can be so easily exploited by those with a clear destination in mind. And so the politicians and pundits who now crack the whip on immigration need to be asked right now where this ends. They should be made to say the thing they are judiciously trying to avoid saying, or to renounce it completely. I agree. Bottom line, the idea of mass deportations as a realistic political agenda would have felt as far-fetched 2 decades ago as the idea of your non-white friends being strapped into a plane does now. This in itself should serve as a warning. That is totally true. The reason mass deportations have become a necessity is because millions of illegal migrants and foreign criminals are currently here, and they need to go home.